This is Polyphonic Press, the podcast where two music fans pick a classic album completely at random. Using the patented random album generator, they are given an album to review from a curated list of over 1,000 classic releases, spanning multiple genres. And now onto the show. Here are your hosts, Jeremy Boyd and John Van Dyke.
All right, hey, welcome to Polyphonic Press. I'm Jeremy Boyd.
And I'm John Van Dyke.
And let's get straight into it here. We've got the patented random album generator in front of us. So all we need to do is click the button and see what album we're going to be listening to this week. And so the album we're going to be listening to is Fats Domino, This Is Fats. So the album is called This Is Fats Domino. All right, so... This Is Fats Domino is the third album by R&B pianist and vocalist Fats Domino. The album was released by Imperial Records in December 1956. The album was released, is reissued in 1969 as stereo. In fact, electronically re-recorded to simulate stereo as printed on cover. The new owner of Imperial Records. The album is included in the reference book 1001 albums you must hear before you die, so that's why it's on the list. Okay, so here we go. Here's the first song on This Is Fats. It's called The Rooster Song. Okay, so that concludes the first half of the album. Yeah, really cool stuff. Really cool stuff. It's weird. I'm looking, and it seems like what's on Apple Music is a completely different track list from what I'm seeing on other places. So
that's bizarre. I
don't know what's going on, but anyway, we're going with the version that's on Apple Music in case anybody is wondering. So yeah, I think it's really interesting hearing how the he's known to be like one of the pioneers of rock and roll, and just hearing we always think of guitar as being the driving force of rock and roll, but there's very little guitar here. It's mostly driven by his piano playing, which he's an amazing piano player, and the saxophone. So this is very early rock and roll. This is sort of like the very, starting of it, Well, I guess this is a few years into it, but I mean this is his like third or fourth album, but I mean this style anyway is very early rock and roll.
Yeah, I was really impressed with his piano playing, especially on Hey La Ba Bookie. I thought that was pretty cool. Dude had fingers that could really, dance their way up the ivories. I don't have much else to say about it at the moment. Just that this is, classic, original rock and roll. It's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, really, yeah, that's that's all it is, really. I mean, that last song was kind of different. Was called "Don't You Hear Me Calling You." That was with the bongos playing. I mean, that sort of gave it more of a Latin feel. And sort of, and just, something a little bit different. And that's the thing, too, that I always, that you hear, okay, so, Fats Domino has a very distinct sound.
Mm-hmm.
And, and then you hear, Bo Diddley, and he has his sound. And Chuck Berry has his sound. And all these guys in the early rock and roll were doing similar things, but they all had their own sound, their own thing, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's just the way they play, the way they sing, the way they write songs, whatever they put into it, their personality comes out in the songs. and in their music. And that's something that I noticed here. It's like, okay, yeah, this is 50s rock and roll, but it's like, this is definitely Fats Domino. Like, I'm not going to confuse it for anybody else. And so, like, I don't quite, you don't get that. You get that now with people
certain
making...
artists will do it, but yeah, there's a lot of bleed over in some artists, or it's very hard to sort of distinguish them from other contemporaries.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say you get it now in the sense that people making deliberate choices in like certain sounds they want to create and on like certain synthesizers and whatever, and that's cool. I'm not knocking it down or anything like that. If you want to create whatever kind of music you want to create, I'm not gonna say anything about that. But what I'm saying is, like, it's their distinct sound comes just from the way they play. If I know he's not a guitar player, but I think, like, if Bo Diddley and Chuck Berry were to pick up the same guitar, they would sound completely different from each other. Yeah. And so I'm just saying, like, it's their personalities are coming out in the way they play, the way they sing, where, like, on the beat that they come in, and it's just, instinctual.
Yeah, it's hard to fake that sort of thing. But I thought it was an interesting choice where he did the standard. I guess they used to do that more often, where they would do sort of like a rock and roll, like, upbeat take on an old standard, and he chose As Time Goes By. I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, they would do that a lot. I mean, they would, rock and roll. That still happens. That's kind of a tradition that a lot of people do. I think there's punk versions of the song from The Wizard of Oz.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember the name of it. It's the famous song from Wizard of Oz.
We're off to see the wizard?
No, the slow Somewhere Over the Rainbow. But there's, like, punk rock versions of that. So it's like, it's sort of interesting that tradition kind of starts here in the very it's in the very foundation of rock and roll. So so anyway, I guess we'll move on to the second half of the album, and it starts off with a song. It's called "It's You I Love." Okay, ending the album with "You Know I Miss You." There's not much variation in the songs, really, but I mean, that's not really what I'm looking for when I listen to something like this, Yeah,
I did notice there's a lot more guitar usage in the second half of the album. In fact, there was even a guitar solo in just the last song there, so.
There was one song, I think it was Baby Please, or no, Where Did You Stay, where he was, like, scat singing, doing this wah wah sort of thing as a part of the solo, and then the piano solo was after that. So I thought that was cool that he was sort of using his voice to almost mimic a guitar.
Oh yeah.
So I thought that was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, this is this was really cool to listen to. I mean, it's interesting to sort of see, like, I know this is a few years into rock and roll being famous or being popular, and this, I think it really sort of became mainstream like around 1955 or so, but I mean, he was making records, a few years before that, and sort of this is kind of, so it's like this is what you're hearing is sort of the it's the same sound, and sort of it's where rock and roll started, and I think a lot of the time he is really credited with starting rock and roll. I don't necessarily disagree with that. It might not be completely accurate, but I think he was really the first one to at least, record rock and roll.
Maybe some of the really early blues, like not really early blues, but some of the early electric blues, I would say, going back to the late 40s. Some of that is very rock and roll in its structure and overall sound, and even just the electrification of it. It's the more upbeat songs could be very mistaken for being rock and roll very, very easily.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of an evolution, right? It's from
it was absolutely an evolution.
There's no real distinct cutoff point. It's okay, the blues is sort of changing a little bit, and now we're sort of, so that you can sort of say, well, this is the first rock, and it's totally debatable about where you can draw that line, but it's really just a slow sort of evolutionary process, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, because you got guys like Jimmy Reed and Johnny Guitar Watson and stuff, and other guys like that who are playing stuff that were very much, and they could continue playing that stuff even. I think some of them even went on to sort of just accept the rock and roll sort of moniker, so they could advance their careers.
And I guess the people like I guess B.B. King, you could say he's rock and roll, although
sometimes I would say Freddie King and Albert King were, whereas they're definitely rooted in the blues. They're just as rock and roll as say I don't know, early ZZ Top or even Led Zeppelin at times were. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I was it's funny you mentioned that. I was actually just this is just sort of reminded me. So there's I don't know if you probably heard it, is Cheap Trick's version of a Fats Domino song, Ain't That a Shame. And it has that long jam at the beginning where it's that the intro really builds up and then it goes into the song.
Yeah.
Apparently that was Fats Domino's favorite cover of any of his songs. That was his favorite, any song that was ever covered, and that was his favorite. And actually, I think he actually handed his gold record to them.
Wow.
I don't know if they kept it or whatever. It was a photo opportunity anyway, but it was he really enjoyed. He thought that was his favorite cover of any of his songs.
Yeah, it is a good one.
So he's definitely an interesting guy, and he lived to the age of 89. I mean, he only died a few years ago. He was born in 1928, and which it's weird because you think he was in his, I guess he would have been in his 30s in the 50s, right? So
yep,
or in his 20s, I guess.
20s, 30s, around there.
There, yeah.
Say he was born 1929, you said?
28.
28, sorry. 28.
Yeah.
So, 28, 38.
So he would have been 20 and 48. So, yeah, I guess he would have been in his 20s, almost 30 when this came out.
Late 20s into his early 30s by the time rock and roll was, in its infancy and stuff like that. So, yeah.
So, so it's he was around for a long time, and so I think because of that, he was a little bit older. He can be sort of credited as one of, definitely, if not the pioneer of rock and roll, but definitely one of them. One of the ones that were there at the beginning for sure, and the blues artist you mentioned as well. I mean, so yeah, it's really cool to listen to the where this thing sort of started. Or at least what we know of it now was where it started. Yeah. So, I guess we will end the podcast there. Thank you so much for listening if you made it this far. Be sure to check us out on polyphonicpress.com. You can drop us a line. And if you feel inclined to help us out, you can go to patreon.com/polyphonicpress, and you can get these episodes a week before they come out, and a bunch of cool stuff there as well. And I think that's pretty much it. I'm Jeremy Boyd.
And I'm John Van Dyke.
Take it easy.